Yeah.
Just waiting
We're
for Carl.
all set. We're live.
Perfect. Thank you very much, Mr. Chair. We are live. You may start the meeting.
Okay. Well, I guess I'm supposed to make some chair's remarks, and I think the main chair's remarks are what I sent out with the reporting forms about the mystery snails. We've got really low water, and people can find shells of mystery snails and get the information back to me. We'll have a better idea of how many there are. The banded mystery snails in the Castor River that we found just below the weir at Russell are just incredibly abundant for a new population, and it's going to be interesting to see how many there are down the Castor River, and then what it's going to look like at High Falls and downstream of there. This is a species that's really widespread in sort of came up the Erie Canal and then sort of got into the Rideau Canal, and it's all through cottage country, but it was new in 2012 when we first found it in the South Nation drainage at at Russell. So, yeah, the thing that's distinctive is the low water, and the Ottawa River is also very low water. And Alita and I are going to be going out. I think the first thing we're going to do is go to Lac Georges, which is an embayment from the Ottawa River and totally unexplored for mussels. So those are my remarks.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. And I just saw one or two more folks drop on. So I will do roll call just so we know who's on online. So we have our chair, Fred Schuler, Malcolm Clark, Bruce Clark, Alvin Clough Clybourne, Doug Kluver, Stefan Dubuc, Abraham Francis, Alida Karstead, Sean Landrio, Kirk Mydell, Bill Smurl, Larry Smith, and Geoff Cote. And did I miss any committee members? That sounds like everyone. So, Mr. Chair, we can move on to the approval of the agenda. There is no supplemental today. Just a note, under item 7A, update from Angela on the Conservation Authorities Act. That verbal update, Angela has another commitment at the moment, so she will be joining us a little bit late, so we may just need to move that item a little bit further down into the agenda until she's able to connect with us. So if there are no other changes to the agenda, be looking for a mover and a seconder to approve it for our chair.
I'll move Alvin.
Alvin and Larry, thank you. And if there are no other changes, Mr. Chair, you may call in the question.
Okay, is anyone opposed?
Seeing none, that item is carried. Are there any declarations of conflict of interest for this agenda? Seeing none, we can move on to our staff PowerPoint presentation. And we have a couple of new staff members who are joining us for the summer who will introduce themselves. Go ahead, Hope.
Hi, can you hear me?
Yes, we can.
Perfect. So hi, everyone. My name is Hope Boyle. I'm completing my Honors Bachelor of Science in Biomedical Science at the University of Ottawa. I'm hoping to pursue a Master's Science in Environmental Sustainability. Some of the projects I'll be working on is the South Bear Brook Catchment Study and monthly water quality sampling, as well as turtle nesting site monitoring and vernal pool monitoring as well.
Welcome, Hope. And Martin.
Good afternoon, everyone. I hope everyone can hear me.
Yep, you're fine.
My name is Martin. Perfect. So my name is Martin Delange. I'm from Ottawa, Orleans, born and raised, and I just finished my bachelor's degree in biomedical sciences at the University of Ottawa. This summer, I'm going to be working as the invasive species technician with South Nation Conservation, and this position is in partnership with the Ontario Federation of Anglers and Hunters, which I am a member of. So in partnership with really these two organizations, I'm going to be working on monitoring and controlling invasive species, especially invasive plants, on SNC owned and managed properties. Additionally, I will also be helping out with projects such as the vernal pool and turtle nesting site monitoring, as well as any other projects or programs where my help is appreciated at SNC. Thank you.
Thank you, Martin. And you'll see on our agenda, we do have a work plan for Martin for the summer coming up for your review. Naomi. Do we have Naomi online?
Yes, I'm here now.
Okay, perfect.
Sorry. So this slide, we were, a lot of the staff at South Nation were planting trees. We were involved in the spring tree planting. We had a record year in terms of sales, 220,000 trees, and quite a number of staff in the office were involved in planting. So we had almost 50,000 trees to plant, and we got those in the ground over a period of 23 days. So I'm glad that's over. So my back was very sore.
I'd like to give a shout out to Naomi and Brent, who actually helped lead our South Nation tree planting crews, while Carolyn and Phil from our forestry department helped with the contract planting. So awesome job, you guys, and the rest of the stewardship team that came out with shovels as well. Well done.
So how is the lack of water going to affect these planted trees?
Well, ideally, we'll get some rain, hopefully midweek. That would certainly be helpful. We did see some survival issues last year with the drought. So we had some sites this year that we needed to do refill on. Last year, we were in a much worse low water situation that extended far into the summer. So the longer the low water conditions persist, the harder it is for the seedlings to do well. So we do, as part of the program, a survival assessment in the fall. After the first year, they're planted, the second year, and the fifth year. So hopefully we'll get enough rain to keep them going, but we will have our forestry staff will be out to do survival assessments this fall. But some rain would be good.
Also, we've been continuing with the vernal pool monitoring. I'd like to give a shout out as well to Kirk Myaldi, who's been helping with the vernal pools that are located in Bourget. SNC staff have been looking after the ones in Shanley. So there's 2 South Nation properties that Environment and Climate Change Canada paid to have the vernal pools constructed. And so in the photo is vernal pool number 2 on the Shanley site. I snuck up on this pond because I could see that there was turtles on some of the woody debris in there. And I counted in one of the pictures 20. So there was more than that because I had to, it's kind of hard to sneak in when you're wading through water. Some of them did slip away, but I was pleasantly surprised. We also heard a lot of frogs calling. We weren't able to get out early enough. I don't think any of us heard any of the western chorus frog, the species that we're hoping to attract to these sites. But we did. There are some tadpoles. Unfortunately, the crew that were out there a couple of days ago, Ryan and the summer students, went to check on the vernal pools. And the Shanley one, one of the ones closest to the roads, has American toad tadpoles, but they're in very shallow water. So they tried to capture them and transport them over to the other deeper pools. So hopefully we have some survival. But these darn droughts, it's making it hard for us to determine the actual ideal depths for these vernal pools, because we've had now 2 drought situations last year, and of course this year is not looking very wet, so the water levels are getting low. Kirk's last report to the water levels at the Bourget site are also very, very low, dry in most of them, and just a little bit of, dampness in one or two of the other ponds. So I don't know what we're going to do about that.
Question from Bill. You mentioned that you were looking at the depth. Do you think that deeper would be better, and how much deeper, and how deep are they now?
So what we were aiming for is something that's temporary, right? So the vernal pools have to be temporary in nature because the western chorus frog, that is they need to have that temporary water to prevent some of the more predatory species such as fish and other, green frogs, bullfrogs, that sort of thing, that may predate on the western chorus frog young. They try to avoid those types of ponds. What we were aiming for was something less than a meter, because the ponds at Bob Graham, which are, as you know, in the same vicinity as the Shanley pools, were constructed to 1 meter, and from our observations, those ponds were too deep. They don't tend to dry up, although they have been drying up the last couple years. They tend to be more permanent. So we aimed for about 75 centimeter maximum depth, in the hopes that it would dry up in late July, August, that sort of thing, which would allow enough time for the tadpoles to transform into adults and move out. However, as I've mentioned, we haven't had those ideal conditions. We've had, 2 springs that are dry, and so it doesn't create the scenario that we're hoping to create. So if we could have a normal spring, it would be nice to test to see whether these pools actually hold water long enough, but we may not get that answer this year.
So we have an exciting expansion on that partnership with Environment and Climate Change Canada. When we were talking to them about continuing the vernal pool monitoring this year, we happened to mention that we had created a slew of turtle nesting habitats at different sites over the course of a few years. With some funding we had back then, provincial funding and federal funding. And they were very interested in those structures because they wanted to know how they perform over kind of an extended time frame. So these were structures it's probably over 10 years ago now that we had created these. So they were very interested to know, how are they functioning now? Are turtles still using them? Are they completely covered in vegetation and turtles avoiding them? How do they look? Because they often require proponents in species at risk permits to create nesting habitats. So any information they can get on kind of the practical side of it, they're interested in. So they're supporting some monitoring we're doing that both Hope and Martin mentioned. So we're going back to these sites. There's 8 sites that we're visiting throughout May and June. We're going weekly to the sites to take a look if there's any evidence of nesting activity or predated nests, as you can see in the photo, the eggshell fragments there, just to see how they're performing, and also to get an idea of the vegetation on these structures. So Environment Canada is gonna get all that information, and they're gonna use it kind of for their own internal purposes when it comes to kind of turtle nesting habitat. We're also looking at the roadsides at the locations where we have these structures to see, are the turtles avoiding them completely and just using the roads as they have been doing in the past, as kind of an extra information also as well to gather at those 8 sites. So we had a little bit of a snag at the beginning of the season with the provincial lockdown, of course. So we didn't get out as early as we had wanted to the first week of May, but we're on track for the rest of the monitoring for that. So. And another study that
for turtle nesting, if I can interrupt here about the turtle nesting, the turtles often nest just sort of at 6 o'clock, 7 o'clock in the afternoon, and if you go during the middle of the day, you're unlikely to actually see the turtles nesting, and it'd be nice to see actual nesting rather than just seeing the ones that the raccoons have found.
That's a good point, Fred. That's something maybe we'll look into seeing the timing, if we can alter the timing of it at all. We have seen turtles in the vicinity. There's lots of turtles around those sites, but yeah, we didn't see any nesting. Another project that we're working on is the South Bear Brook Catchment Study. We've kind of talked about our catchment studies with you in the past. This is a 2-year study we're doing on the South Bear Brook, which is kind of the area you see outlined in dark purple there. We're in year 2 of our data collection. So at the end of this year, we're going to start doing all the analysis and the reporting. We provide a detailed report to the city of all the findings and analysis. We look at forest cover, wetland cover. We look at the water quality. There's a whole slew of information we collect. And some of the first work that we're going to be doing coming up this month, June, is some of the fish sampling. So you can see here kind of all the sites marked out for our fish sampling, and here as well as the stars are temperature sensors that we're going to be deploying as well. So we've gone out to these sites in the past, and we've kind of looked at what the best methodology is going to be for the fish sampling. So you'll see there's some areas where we're going to be doing electrofishing, some areas we're going to set some fyke nets, probably do some seine netting as well, depending on each of the sites. So we're excited for this work because it's always a lot of fun. So hopefully we'll have decent water levels when it comes to that. So that'll be coming up next week. We'll be starting that work. And an update on our Ontario Power Generation program. We're in year 2 of our 3-year program, where we're going to be doing work at some SNC properties. The first is the J. Henry Tweed Conservation Area. There's a few locations along the stream that runs through the conservation area where we've identified erosion issues, particularly where it comes close to the trail. So where it will eventually impact infrastructure, we flag those areas as higher priority to address. We did some work under our previous Ontario Power Generation agreement at a couple of locations along the creek already, and we're just continuing that work at the next 3 spots we've identified as priority locations. So in the photos, one spot you can see I'm standing on the trail, and you can see where it's eroding very close to the trail. So it's an area we're going to be targeting. This year we went out with our engineering team a couple of times to the site so that they could collect the measurements they needed to come up with a design in-house. And we're trying to do as much as possible natural techniques for erosion. Obviously there's some areas where it's not completely possible, but one of the sites at our previous with our previous agreement, we did log deflectors, and it's working very, very well. And the engineering team as well as the property team is very pleased with how that project turned out. So we're planning to use the same methodology as well for these next sites. And the actual on the ground work is going to start this winter with some site preparation. There's a lot of dead ash trees that are in some of the locations that we're going to have to remove. And then the actual in-stream construction work will happen next year. So this year is more about preparing and getting the designs all ready. And then next slide, Rhonda. So the other piece of that Ontario Power Generation project is invasive species control on 2 properties, the Gamble property just outside of Greeley in the city of Ottawa, and the Garlandside Road property, which is also in the city of Ottawa. So this is an aerial photo of the Gamble property. There's a lot of ash on it, and obviously high ash mortality. So the plan is to create pockets where we're going to remove the dead ash, remove any invasive buckthorn, and replant kind of these satellite plantings within the property, with the hopes that eventually it'll create these kind of islands where there's things other than buckthorn and invasives, and they can kind of spread out from there. And then on the Garland Side Road property, it's mainly buckthorn. There's an area infested with buckthorn where there used to be a sawmill on the property. So it was open, the canopy was open, the buckthorn came in, and it's spread out a little bit. Naomi went out and kind of flagged the area. It's spread out a bit, but it's mostly concentrated in that area where the sawmill was. So we're going to be doing control on the buckthorn in that area and then replanting as well. The interesting part about this is we've partnered with Agriculture and Agri-Food Canada. They're very interested in this project, and they're going to be doing research on the control that we do on the buckthorn, as well as research on those satellite plantings within the Gamble property. So there'll be some added benefits in terms of monitoring and more information that we'll be able to get through the partnership with them.
Good afternoon, everybody. So SNC is completing some environmental studies and an environmental impact statement for South Stormont Township. And this is at a location just east of Long Sault in South Stormont Township near the St. Lawrence River. So at this location, the township is looking to grow their industrial park and add some infrastructure into this area. So in consultation with Raisin Region, our neighbors to the east, as well as the Ministry of Environment, Conservation and Parks and South Stormont, SNC is going to be doing this study on South Stormont's behalf to help them put this industrial park in a sustainable way, so a way that doesn't impact the main feature on the site, which is shown here, the Lakeview Marsh provincially significant wetland. So through this year and into next year, SNC will be doing studies on this site for all the typical things: birds, bats, amphibians. Ministry of Environment, Conservation and Parks has identified quite a few species at risk, so we'll be looking for them as well, and then offering mitigations to the township on how they can develop around this feature without impacting it in a negative way. Next slide, please. So grasslands, this is an update on some funding that SNC was lucky enough to get from Grasslands Ontario. So this is a newer division of Forests Ontario where funding is given out to improve grassland habitat in the province. So at this site, SNC 164 in Shanley, SNC will be creating a hay management plan. So this is in order to improve the agricultural production of this property. And then we'll also be creating a plan that benefits species at risk grassland birds. So in particular, bobolink and eastern meadowlark, which we've already documented using this site quite extensively. So there was quite a bit of interest from Grasslands in Ontario to fund us to undertake this project. And we also have some participation from Agriculture and Agri-Food Canada now, who are going to be helping with our hay management plan and the sustainable use of this property and benefits for grassland birds. Next slide, please.
Before you leave that slide, Bill has a question.
Yes.
When you read the management plan, when you get to the end of the nesting season, because that's part of the reason for leaving the grass grow,
we lost you halfway through there, Bill.
Sorry about that. Will you be leaving it as grass when you get to the end of the nesting season? Will you be leaving it as a grass cover or will you be cutting it, or will you be trying to have a farmer cut it and take it off?
Good question, Bill. So what we're going to be doing is following a hay production schedule that coincides with after the nesting season is done for bobolink. So it will be harvested after the bobolinks have been monitored and left the site. And we will be procuring a local farmer to undertake the actual hay removal from the site and the harvest of that hay, and all of the inputs to the site, so via fertilizers or anything that Agriculture and Agri-Food Canada suggests in order to increase the production of hay on the site. We'll take those recommendations and use the partnership with a local farmer to implement those to more or less use this as a demonstration of taking off hay sustainably and also improving your hay harvest at the same time.
Excellent, thank you.
So this is a slide I put in just to.
Are you?
Yeah, go ahead, Fred.
Sorry. Are you going to also try to get tall grass prairie plants in there, wildflowers and stuff, or even the tall grass prairie grasses?
Another good question, and you guys, your questions are telling me I should have put more detail into this slide. So we are going to be doing that. Part of this project, it's a little deeper than I first explained. We're going to be assessing the vegetation that's on site from a hay perspective. So the farmer's perspective for what he wants in hay, and then we'll also be looking at the hedgerows that are on the site and doing vegetation surveys within those to document the species. And then we'll be supplementing those based upon what a farmer would like to see in the site, as well as what's good for grassland bird species. So whatever seeding mix we, if that's the recommendation that comes out of our management plan study, whatever seeding mix will be chosen to benefit not only the grassland birds, but hay production from an agricultural perspective. So, and touching on the hedgerows, those will be taking a deep look at the species in those as well by Agriculture and Agri-Food Canada. And they may also be supplemented with additional plantings to fill in some of the gaps in these more culturally significant hedgerows with species to take over from all the dead ash that we're finding in these hedgerows.
And just a note, we do actually have a report coming up on this initiative where there's a bit more detail as well. Michelle will get us to that under new business.
Yeah, exactly. Okay, so this slide's in here to just give a little update on some of the work we do at SNC with regards to other agencies. So whenever somebody applies for a permit with SNC through Jeff Owens and regulations, if that project has a potential to impact some fish habitat or potentially the crown bed or river, we will help the applicant through those processes and make sure they know of the other agencies that they have to be in contact with, or they should be in contact with. So for this particular example here, you see the South Nation River in Castleman, where a relatively new development on the north side of the river near the bridge has resulted in a lot of people owning the waterfront and also wanting to enjoy that waterfront through adding docks, erosion control, and different things like that. So in this particular case, last year at SNC, we started getting quite a few permit applications for erosion control along this area. So we got into contact with DFO because these are types of projects that can impact fish and fish habitat. And we also got in contact with our local MNRF, and we let them know that these types of projects were coming their way. And then we helped people through those processes. So anyone that applied through SNC for a permit to do this type of work, we helped them through getting their approvals from DFO. And we also made sure they got their work permits if they applied from the MNRF in Kempville. So it's a good example of us liaising with these other agencies and making sure people that apply are aware of everything they need to check off to be compliant. And this slide here, I'm just going to do on behalf of Ryan because he's unable to attend. So earlier in May, Ryan attended a Class 1 electrofishing training course. So this is nice for SNC because we have quite a few staff trained in Class 2 electrofishing. And actually on that, we just did the training this morning, a few of us, Naomi and Michelle and I. We are going to be Class 2 trained, meaning we can operate a backpack e-fisher. Earlier in May, Ryan became Class 1 trained, meaning he can now train and certify our staff in-house. So getting training, especially during the pandemic, is a little bit trickier. Now we have the ability to train in-house, so it should work quite a bit better for SNC in the future to train our own staff as well as seasonal staff that may come and go. So this is some great training that Ryan was able to get.
Good afternoon, everyone. So this slide is just to update you on a project. South Nation Conservation was retained by Mohawk Council of Akwesasne to help assist with a flood mitigation strategy development project. So we collaborated with Abraham at MCA as well as the folks over at the River Institute to support several deliverables, including GIS training of MCA staff, research into available data within Akwesasne Mohawk territory to assist with future flood vulnerability and flood hazard assessments, as well as developing a methodology to assist with a future flood vulnerability assessment. And I don't know, Abraham, if you had anything that you might want to add to this slide.
I am just so grateful to the SNC water team for all the work that they've done, and I really appreciate the presentation that they gave to our executive director, as well as to one of our portfolio chiefs on Monday, that really captured exactly what we are really is giving us guidance on forward on how we can do some really good water management in Akwesasne. So thank you, Kat, and thank you to the rest of the water team for everything you've done for us.
Thanks so much, Abraham. That's awesome. Thank you. This slide is just to sort of, I guess, present how we're using new technology to update how we capture river flows. So back in, I guess it was December, we installed some new equipment at Chesterville Dam, and we're using our water information system by Kisters. That's the database where we house all of our, actually not just our water quantity data, but as well as our water quality and soon our biological data. But basically we've updated rating curves in Whiskey to capture flows downstream of the dam. And we're using this river surveyor boat here. It's a discharge. It's able to measure flow. So we're using this to basically validate flows that are being calculated by Whiskey and by that new technology that we deployed at the dam. So this is typically a lot of our stream gauges and rating curves are operated by Water Survey Canada, but this station downstream of the dam is operated by SNC. Oh.
Do we have any questions for any of our staff presenters before we move on? Okay, hearing none, we'll continue on with.
Sorry, Rhonda, Alita has her hand up.
Oh, sorry, Alita, I missed you. You're not sure. There you are. Go ahead, Alita.
I'm not very good at working in Microsoft Teams. I'm more used to Zoom, so just where things are. Anyway, just looking at the picture of that neat boat, I mean, is that a boat that people can be on, or what's the control? Is it a remote control boat? How does that operate?
Yeah, it's pretty neat equipment. It's small. It's about the size of maybe a kind of shorter surfboard actually. And the Doppler equipment sits in the middle of it, and it can capture velocity of water as well as river depths. So you can actually also capture bathymetry with it. And then it talks to the program on the computer sort of by radio, and it's a really, I guess, powerful piece of equipment to capture really detailed, again, kind of river bathymetry and flow information. So that we can be out there. You can drag it with other boats. You can kind of walk it using a tow rope across a bridge, so that you can capture flows, not just during times when you're able to wade, but also during high water level events, such as kind of during the spring freshet. And actually, I should note. Oh, sorry, go ahead, Alita.
So it's not remote control. You just have to be there with it.
You do, yeah. This one, I'm sure.
Kind of a survey rest.
Yes, correct. Yeah, I'm sure that there's equipment that exists that is remote controlled, but yeah, but this one it's sort of staff have to be there to pull it or tow it. So when we were out, I forgot to mention when we were out doing the sampling here in the South Nation River, just downstream of Chesterville Dam. Actually, there were river red horse all over the place, jumping, and it was fantastic.
Great, thank you, Kat. If there are no other questions, we can move on to item 5 on the agenda, which is the approval of the minutes from our March 4th meeting. You'll find those in your package on pages 3 to 9. And we'll be looking for a motion to approve those minutes. I have Doug Thompson. Oh, hi, Doug. I didn't see you pop in there. Doug, and I have Stefan. Great, thank you very much. Are there any errors or omissions on the minutes? Okay, hearing none, the recommendation is that the members approve the Fish and Wildlife Committee virtual meeting minutes of March 4th, 2021 as submitted. Mr. Chair, you can call your question.
Oh, okay. Are there any objections?
Hearing none, that item is carried.
Sorry, Rhonda.
Oh, sorry.
Can I interrupt for a second? I didn't get the seconder of that motion.
I have Stefan.
Okay, thank you.
You're welcome. So unless there are any other questions, we didn't have any business arising tagged from those minutes. Okay, Angela has not joined us yet, so we're just going to defer item 7A until Angela Coleman, our general manager, is able to connect with us. So we will come back to this item. We'll move on to item 7B on page 10. I believe that's Michelle.
Yes, thank you, Rhonda. So this report is bringing our work plan for our Ontario Federation of Anglers and Hunters Summer Students. So Martin, who you heard from earlier in the slideshow, we brought a report like this back in 2019 for the committee's review and approval. In 2020, we did not have a student. OFA that summer did not have students due to the pandemic, but luckily this year they did, and we were able to have a student with us. So we're bringing the work plan to you again for comment, feedback, and approval. So the work plan is attached to the report. And the way the OFA position works is that OFA received funding from Service Canada under the Canada Summer Jobs Program. And then SNC tops up the salary to match our pay grid, and then also extends the position as well. We were only approved for 10 weeks for the position. As you know, 10 weeks isn't a whole lot to do much in the summer, so we extended that all the way up until the end of August so that we have a full summer with Martin for this year. So you can see the actual work plan piece starts on page 11. And it details some of the major tasks that we would like Martin to work on this summer related to invasive alien species. Now, obviously, some of this might be subject to change depending on the public health measures at the time of the activities. So this really affects the first component, which is the education and outreach piece. So I'm not sure at this time if there will be many fairs and events for him to attend to circulate information and pamphlets and visit the bait shops and provide them information like we've done in the past. So same with any kind of fishing tournaments, that sort of thing. We'll have to play it by ear, see how that goes. We do know we have tentatively scheduled dates for our youth fish camps. So we're hoping that those will proceed, and Martin will be in attendance at those camps to provide an invasive species information piece. We do that with all the fish camps every year, so he'll be able to do that, as well as help the attendees with recognizing invasive species, but also helping them with the fishing in general, that piece about it. So Martin's very eager and interested in the education side of biology and conservation. So I think it's a great fit for him to help out with that piece. Under data management, we're hoping to have a consolidated, database for all our invasive species data. It's a big job, and we've started it, but it basically involves combing through the files from past OFA summer students to consolidate all of the information that we have into one location, and we're trying to get it up into EdMaps Ontario, which is kind of the provincial, it's like a provincial database basically for invasive species information. So, and it's something we also want in our property files for our own properties, because it's important information for us to know, especially in terms of, if it's going to impact forest operations, if it impacts areas where we know there's species at risk, all of that stuff. So That data management piece, it's a big job, and it's going to take more than just Martin's time with us, but at least we'll get a good start on it. And then monitoring and removal is another big piece that we like to do every year. We do have past control projects that we're going to be revisiting, and actually Martin will be starting that, or has already started that, sorry, this week, to go back to those sites where we've done things like the Phragmites control at Bob Graham, at Leitrim, as well as Warwick Forest. There's a few sites, a few properties that either SNC owns or manages where we know we've had invasive species and we've done some work on in the past. So he's going to be visiting those, taking a look to see how they're doing, if there's, if the population's expanded, if there's, new species in there. He's going to do all that work for us. And then we'll identify whether, which areas we want to go back to and do control on this summer. So luckily for us, Naomi is certified as a pesticide applicator, so we're lucky that way. We can do it in-house. So that'll be something on the work plan. And then I know Fred, you had sent around the mystery snail piece, and that was I didn't get a chance to put that in the work plan before finalizing it, but it's something also that I've chatted with Martin about is going to those along the Castor system and seeing how far they've managed to go. Same with starting in Winchester, because we know they're on the Henderson Creek in Winchester, and moving down from there towards the Castor to see how far in that system they've progressed as well. So.
Are there any questions or comments on the work plan for Michelle? Fred?
Yeah, for the mystery snails, they're also, of course, in Hess Creek, and that's going to give them sort of an opening to be in the main river. And I would suggest that Cass Bridge is the place to look for shells downstream of Hess Creek. And there's another bridge across the river a little upstream of there. All the Chinese mystery snails are coming down. And just as I said in what I sent around, the numbers that we saw in Russell are just astonishing of the banded mystery snails. And Alita and I are going to put our kayaks in and sort of go upstream from Russell to see how far upstream it takes to have the population that generates these thousands and thousands of shells. And then downstream along the Castor to see how abundant they are, and then down to the river at High Falls.
That's a good point. What I might do, Fred, is have Martin, I might get Martin to coordinate with you and see where you're going, and then we'll set up locations for him to go as well.
Right. I will send him I may have had mistakes in the list that I sent out today, but I'll send it to Martin so he can see what we found and what we're trying.
Perfect.
Question from Bill.
Go ahead, Bill.
Yes.
Okay. Read the fish camps. If we're able to go ahead, how many are being thought of, and are they 1 day in length or more?
I believe we're doing what we've done in the past, where it was 3 days. And I think there's at least 3 separate ones planned, and I think it's oh, you're testing my knowledge here, Bill.
You don't need to tell me
later.
Yeah, that's fine.
Yeah, I do believe actually Communications Committee will have that discussion at their meeting coming up in a few weeks. So again, we're just waiting to see how the pandemic safety precautions roll out over the next couple of weeks, and if we're able to actually hold in-person camps.
Thank you.
I did find, sorry, Bill, I found a bit of detail on it. They're going to be 2-day camps, and it'll be Castbridge, High Falls, and Jessup's Falls, and then July and August, depending on the pandemic situation. All right, so the recommendation on page 10 is the committee approve the OFA summer student work plan. I'm looking for a mover and a seconder. I have Bruce and Alvin. Thank you.
Are there any additional questions or comments for Michelle? Mr. Chair, you can call the question.
All right, I'll call the question.
Seeing no opposition, that motion is carried. We'll move on to item 7C, which again is Michelle.
Thanks, Rhonda. So this report is on page 12, and I covered most of it in the slideshow when I talked about the turtle nesting habitat. So this just details our expanded partnership with Environment and Climate Change Canada. So we have the vernal pool habitat monitoring, and then now as well the turtle nesting habitat monitoring. So the reason we're doing the vernal pool monitoring again this year was because we had delays in our capability to do monitoring last spring because of the pandemic. We had to put a hold on the monitoring. Environment and Climate Change Canada requested that. So we carried over the monitoring to this spring, but as Naomi said, it's not proving much better in terms of the drought conditions and water levels. So whether Environment Canada is able to get the information they need, we'll have to wait and see. So we might potentially be doing this again next spring and hope for a better spring then, but till then we'll see. And then the turtle nesting habitat, like I said, it's the 8 sites that we have. They were completed between 2009 and 2015, and those are the ones we're revisiting weekly in May and June, and then we'll report those results to Environment Canada as well. So the projects weren't included in the budget, but Environment Canada is covering all of our time and costs for that. So nice expanded partnership with them.
Are there any additional questions, Fred?
Yeah, I'm one of the things I'm writing up now for our newsletter is the crazy frog calling season we had here, and one of the things that we've seen with chorus frogs that you know, we always had chorus frogs until 1992, and then 93 to 2005 we didn't hear any chorus frogs from home. And last year we had this terrible drought in the early summer and spring, and we thought it was going to just hammer the chorus frogs, but we heard them in a lot of marginal places where they're not usually, I mean, where they're not heard in a lot of years, and that included hearing them from home. But things have certainly been very strange, and the tree frog calling season was only a few nights long, and the males seem to have come back to the trees around the houses. So we just have to hope when we're actually going to listen for the calling at these new vernal pools that we get a more standard year, because the last 2 years have been crazy.
Yes, definitely.
All right, so the recommendation is on page 12. The Fish and Wildlife Committee received and filed the Environment and Climate Change Canada Partnership Update Report. Looking for a mover and a seconder. Have Malcolm.
And Sean for second.
And Sean, thank you, Sean. And if there are no further questions, Mr. Chair, you can call your question.
Okay, we'll call the question.
And see no opposed, that motion is carried. I see Ange has joined us, but I'm just going to finish. We have 2 reports left on new business, and then maybe we'll come back to you, Ange, if that's okay. We'll move on to page 14. Brent, are you covering this one for Ryan?
Actually, I am, Rhonda.
Oh, perfect. Thank you, Naomi.
Says the monitoring one is the next one?
Yes, it is.
Okay. So, as you know, each year we do a wide variety of projects that require the collection, analysis, and reporting of scientific data. Typically, this work begins as soon as the snow starts to melt. We, get out in the field and start collecting data. for the last couple of years, some of this work has been impacted by the pandemic, and however, we've managed, and so we've come up with some standard operating procedures to address, the keeping staff safe and the public safe from the transmission of COVID-19 while we're doing this field work. It's pretty low risk, however, because we're working outside and typically we don't need to be standing close together while we're doing this work. So here's some of the examples of the type of work that we're doing. The headwater drainage features, we've mentioned this before in the past, where we go as the snow is melting and measure the water that's coming off the landscape. So this data is very important for the planning department to look at any developments that are taking place on properties, gives us information about how much drainage is needed on the sites. And there's a lot of other information that can be inferred from this. We had 60 headwater drainage features that we were collecting data for in 2021. Some of that is carryover that we weren't able to do in 2020. I believe we got a total of 55 sites done, and we were, of course, it was starting to get a little bit dry towards the end of that field work. We did notice that the headwater drainage features were drying up quickly, so it did impact a little bit at the end trying to find those last few that we needed, but we did get the majority done. In terms of biological community sampling, we're looking at fish sampling that's planned for to start very soon on the South Bear Brook Catchment study. We've mentioned this study, well, Michelle talked about it earlier in the slideshow. We're looking at a combination of electrofishing, some seine netting and trap netting, which will be dependent upon the site conditions that we come upon. So some of these are stream crossings. We'll be looking at getting landowner permission in some situations where if it's not public land, then we have to get this permission. We also have some municipal drain classification work that's planned for later this year, which we'll be collecting the data using the backpack electrofisher. There's 6 municipal drains that need information so that we can come up with a class for that for those drains. Benthic invertebrate sampling occurs annually in the fall, and that data is being housed in the whiskey database that Kat mentioned. We collect these invertebrates using a standardized methodology, and we send any of the invertebrates, the aquatic bugs that we collect, are sent to a consultant for identification. The water quality sampling. So again, we've mentioned this quite a lot in the past, that we're a partner with the Ministry of the Environment and Conservation and Parks for the Provincial Water Quality Monitoring Network. I think in some cases, or some of our stations are over 7 years old, and we've been collecting this data for quite a long time. It gives us information about whether or not the streams in our watershed are meeting the provincial guidelines that are set. So we are collecting monthly samples while the water's open. Typically we start in April or May, depending on the situation. And I actually collected samples last week. So we did the PWQMN, and also there's Ottawa baseline water quality monitoring that is also a monthly program where we're collecting samples within the South Bear Brook watershed. City Stream Watch is another program that we undertake out in the field, and it looks at collecting information. It's somewhat more in depth. There are some volunteer opportunities with this program whenever we're not under COVID restrictions. We walk the length of watercourse and record the morphological characteristics of the watercourse, looking at areas that may need some stewardship work. So it gives us some opportunities to do some work on the streams with volunteers and working with the landowners. We, can collect this information. The City of Ottawa is interested in knowing these stewardship opportunities as well. We've worked with them in the past on, developing some stewardship plans and putting them on the ground, planting trees, correcting erosion, that sort of thing. So it's a really good program. There's some groundwater well maintenance that will take place, invasive species, as we've mentioned, the vernal pools, the turtle nesting site monitoring, lots of field work that we undertake, and I'm happy to answer any questions if there are any. Thank you.
Thanks, Naomi. Are there any questions for Naomi?
Bill has one.
Yes. Go ahead, Bill, and I'm just looking to see.
Water
Alvin, I'll get you
quality.
next.
Under the water quality sampling, what are you looking for, or what are you finding? Like what kind of results do you get, and what are you seeing from that?
Maybe if Kat wants to answer that, she's our water quality specialist, and she actually looks more closely at the analysis of the data that we gather.
Oh, sure thing. Thanks, Naomi. So we monitor nutrients, metals, kind of general chemistry, chlorides, which can be an indicator for road salts. So again, we're sort of capturing that information on a monthly basis to be able to secure sort of a really long-term record of these water quality results, and so that we can look at trends not just longitudinally through the system, like so comparing kind of our samples in the headwaters near Roebuck to the downstream sections near Plantagenet, and looking at how water quality changes throughout the South Nation, but also over time to see which parameters might be increasing. Recently, we've done sort of some using a Mann-Kendall statistics test to look at chlorides, for example, and which stations are seeing increases in chlorides. And again, that can be an indicator of road salts. And we have actually seen increasing trends in those over time. So whereas something like phosphorus, if you look at the whole record, phosphorus is a nutrient. It can lead to eutrophication. That's a parameter that we've seen decline over time throughout our watershed.
Supplementary from Bill. So after you have these results at the end of the year and you analyze them, are there recommendations that you can give or present or send to any particular groups or anyone that might be able to make a difference or make a change to affect this?
Well, I think we include that information in our watershed report card products. So that's a product that we put out. Well, we work on a sub-watershed basis every year, and then we put out a large sort of state of the nation report every 5 years to look at trends, and that gets shared with our watershed residents and as well as our municipalities. And then this data also contributes to some of our catchment studies that we're completing for the City of Ottawa, for example. And so certainly some recommendations go into, I guess, those documents. And then the data also gets used for us to try to kind of prioritize stewardship projects or other projects across our jurisdiction. I know this data gets incorporated into how the Clean Water Committee distributes funds for grants, for example. I think that gets it, that water quality rating gets included as one of the factors for the point system in which products or which projects are approved.
Thank you. I think it's really important to share that information, and as things get better with this COVID moving along, more full-fledged presentations to municipalities or others, I think are really important, because so many people get so many papers and they see a report and they don't really pay much attention. But when they have a person that's animated and presenting, it makes a difference. Thanks a lot.
Thanks, Bill. I believe Alvin had a question.
Hello, Naomi.
Hello.
Those vernal pools that you're talking about, are they perfectly level?
We try to incorporate as many configurations as possible. So we have some that are long and narrow, which if you see where some of them are situated, they're actually to try and simulate what would happen or what happens to ponds that are placed on trails. Because if you've ever been into La Rose Forest or any place like that, you'll note that in the springtime, those flooded tracks that are created by vehicles can sometimes actually become habitat for amphibians. So we have a lot of different configurations, lots of different shapes and varies variety of depths. But as I mentioned, we tried not to go too deep because we were trying to avoid permanent ponds. However, we've had some springs that haven't really been conducive to creating a long enough season, water in terms of water depth and water persistence on the landscape for the amphibians to complete their life cycle, unfortunately. So we saw that last year. We had some of the ponds had American toad tadpoles that died because it dried up end of May, I believe, and we're seeing the same thing again this year. Some of the ponds still have water, but some of them are drying up. Bourget is pretty dry right now, and only the big pond, I think, or two of the ponds at the Shanley site still have water. So that is an issue, I guess, in drought situations, that these types of habitats can dry up too early.
Okay, that sounds good. I was thinking if they were, rather than be flat, have one deeper area, that if you had a drought, that some might live through the drought.
And that's something that we're going to talk to Environment Canada about, is whether or not these ponds need to be deepened. And how much deeper. Like, we do have ponds that have deeper sections, like, they weren't all uniform in terms of depths. They have sections that are deeper and, shallower at one end and deeper in others. However, we were trying to avoid, as I mentioned, going deeper than as deep as a meter, because we knew that at Bob Graham, for example, that in the past, that depth was, the water was staying in it year round.
Okay, that sounds good. Thank you.
Bill has another question, and that is, what's the life expectancy of frogs and toads that are using these ponds? And if we have 2 years in a row, does that eradicate them, or do they live longer than 2 years?
I'm going to defer to Fred on that. He's the expert on amphibians.
Yeah, the thing about the western chorus frog, and the reason that it's is sort of our most endangered frog or toad, is that it is an annual species, and basically the eggs are laid one year, they grow up, and then they reproduce the next year. And so if there is a drought, they can be wiped out from an area. And we did some analysis of the calling that I talked about in Bishop's Mills, and the years that they came back were the years that had the wetter summers. So it's a real problem digging these ponds. What you want what you need is sort of what's called metapopulation connections, where you can have a number of sites where the animals live, and they can disperse between them, so that if reproduction isn't successful in one site, they can get there from the other site. And here in Bishop's Mills, we have a big marsh swamp sort of place down at the foot of Hares Hill Road, and the chorus frogs disperse about 1,200 meters from there to the other places that we hear them after a wet year. And so for digging these new ponds, the trick is going to be to make a series of different depths that allow reproduction in different years without having any of them deep enough and permanent enough that they can get fish, because if there's fish in the pond, the fish eat the tadpoles, and there's no reproduction. So it's a delicate balancing act, and one of the things that's happened with chorus frog habitat is that it's gotten squeezed between urbanization and intensified agriculture and tile drainage, so there's less ponds and ditches in agricultural land, and also the filling in of ditches along roads, because when they first built roads in this part of the world, they dug the soil up from the ditches on either side of the road and to make the roadbed. But then people would get drunk and they would drive off the roads and ruin their vehicles and kill themselves. And so since the 1960s, the municipalities have started to smooth out the ditches that went along the roads, and those were ditches that chorus frogs could use to disperse between different habitats. So there's a whole lot of things that made life difficult for chorus frogs, and these intense spring droughts don't help either. And I was the reason I had my hand up on the thing is are you working with the Riverkeeper on their road salt project?
Fred, I haven't reached out yet, but I have seen some of the correspondence that you've had. I believe it's with Katie. Is that correct?
Yes.
And I will definitely reach out to see sort of what results that, if any, if they're collecting across our jurisdiction, and to see what their study is all about.
They have a lot of stations they've been mostly done in Ottawa and I think some in Gatineau, but it's urban situations, and I'm urging them. They had one station at Greens Creek where the water was saltier than the seawater at some points.
Oh, wow.
To see if they can get their volunteers to go and see if there's mussels or snail shells to indicate how the mollusk populations may be affected by these episodes of salty water.
Are there any other questions for Naomi on the monitoring report? Okay, seeing none, the recommendation on page 14 is that the Fish and Wildlife Committee receive and file the 2021 monitoring update. Looking for a mover. Thank you, Malcolm. And a seconder. Doug, thank you. That's Doug Thompson, sorry. I did miss one report. My apologies, Michelle. I jumped ahead of the Grasslands Initiative, so we'll just back up to page 13.
It's okay.
And cover that one.
So Brent touched on this one a little bit in the slideshow. It's just to talk about our partnership with Agriculture and Agri-Food Canada. So they're very interested in that work we're doing on SNC 164 for the grassland work, and they're bringing actually quite a lot of resources to the project in terms of subject matter experts. For example, we're going to have some of their crop scientists helping us with the hay management plan, as well as looking at what we need to input onto the property for those two items that Brent talked about. So not only improving the quality of the forage, but also improving the quality of the species at risk grassland bird habitat as well. So their research scientists are very interested in the interplay between managing a property for hay production and also for grassland birds. So there's going to be a lot of work done on that piece of it. They're also going to be looking at protecting in situ genetically specific species. So they're going to be doing a big inventory, like Brent mentioned, of the grassland, but also the hedgerows. And they're going to be recommending certain species that they want to have on the property protected for their genetic kind of makeup. So instead of finding a plant species that we want to protect and preserve, instead of collecting the seed and keeping it in a seed bank, they are interested in protecting it in situ. So it's very interesting stuff and something different than what I've seen in the past. So they're going to be looking at that piece of it in terms of what plant species are on the property as well. So they're bringing quite a bit to the table. And then from the side of the any nutrient application we're going to do on the property, as well as the hay, the harvesting, they're looking at doing it with precision equipment. So they're going to be providing the GPS equipment that's required to do that precision application of any fertilizer or nutrients that are required, and then also keep the harvest done in a have precision harvesting done on the property as well. So they're going to be coming up with the plan and providing the equipment necessary to do that work. So it's very exciting partnership with them, and a lot of research in years to come that will be happening on that property as well.
Any questions for Michelle?
Yeah.
See.
Do
Go
you
ahead,
have
Fred.
upland sandpipers there? Do you have upland
Pardon?
sandpipers there?
Not that, I don't think we've recorded them there, but we also haven't done our detailed bird monitoring yet. So that's happening. Our staff, Brent's going out to do some surveying, but also Agriculture and Agri-Food Canada staff are going out as well. They have ornithologists on staff that'll be visiting the site to do detailed surveys of not only grassland birds, but also birds using the hedgerows and the edges of the property as well. And they are also planning on installing some autonomous recording units to record birds, throughout a period of time. So we'll have a very detailed bird species list, I think, probably by the winter. So,
Larry, go ahead. You have a question?
Yeah.
This is a very distant question.
Because
This is a very distant question, Michelle. On the property numbers of SNC, such as this property number 164, is there any way on the interactive map that's on the website to see the property number so that you can know which property, when you guys are talking about a number, it's very difficult. I have old information that I gather some numbers, but the new purchases, I can't get the number. And is there any way of having that on the interactive map that's on the website?
that's a very good point, Larry. And yes, I'm sure we could add those numbers to the public portal. This 164 is also the healing place. So that's where we had the project last year that was done to create the healing place on this property. So it's in Edwardsburg Cardinal. It's near Bob Graham as well, or Bob Graham property.
Yeah,
But
it's
yes,
right
good
at
point, Larry.
right at the intersection of Ventnor Road and County Road 22, Larry.
Thank
Just
you.
it's on the northwest corner of that intersection. Fred, did you have another question or comment?
no, just to say that the upland sandpiper really is the archetypal prairie bird, and they used to be pretty general in eastern Ontario, and now they're very scattered because we've lost so much of the grassland. And it would be really nice if we could get them onto this 164 area.
That's a good point, Fred. We'll be sure to talk to the ornithologists that come out to the site to see what if they find them or what their thoughts are on that too. So thank you.
If there are no additional questions, the recommendation is that the Fish and Wildlife Committee receive and file the Grassland Initiative SNC 164 update, looking for a mover and a seconder. I have Alvin, and I'll grab Doug, who's online, because he doesn't have an opportunity to raise his hand. So, does Doug Hoover? Mr. Chair, you can call your question.
Okay, are there any objections to either this one or the last one that we didn't actually call the question on?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Seeing none, both of those are carried. And we'll move on to the funding submissions, and then we'll jump back to item 7A. So
Thank you,
Naomi.
Rhonda. Thank you. I'm very happy to, do this grant update. As you know, this is our bread and butter and how we are able to conduct so much of our work here at South Nation. These are grants that a lot of staffs spend a lot of time working on these grant applications. So I'm happy to say that as Michelle already reported, the Grasslands Ontario grant was approved. The Ontario Power Generation one, we've had several projects come through these funders that we're very happy to be working with them, that elaborate on biodiversity conservation and in partnerships with Indigenous communities. That one was approved as well. The Habitat Stewardship Program, the project is looking at forest bird monitoring. That one is still pending. And then under the National Disaster Mitigation Program, we have 3 that have been approved. So the Bear Brook and tributaries hazard mapping, the Ottawa River flood hazard mapping, and the flood risk assessment partnership have been approved. And this is going to be keeping a lot of our staff very busy for a while. The Oak Valley Restoration project, unfortunately, was denied. That was under the Eco Action Community Funding Program. The Smart Great Lakes Mini Grants Program also was denied. It was a project looking at development and installation of the St. Lawrence River Hydrometric Lab. Canada Nature Fund was denied as well. I'd like to add too that some of these ones that are denied, sometimes we're able to reapply. A lot of times the reason for being denied is simply because they've run out of money. So we continue to bring forward those programs. We work so hard on developing the programs, and of course the need for getting them done continues to exist whether we get it funded or not. So a lot of times if we have opportunities to bring these back, we do so. Under the 2 billion tree program, we've been approved for SNC Forest tree planting on SNC 7. The La Flèche Wetland Trust Fund, a land acquisition, we're still keeping our fingers crossed on that one. It's pending. The SDG Regional Tourism Grant was denied under Fisheries and Oceans Canada, classifying unrated municipal drains, another one that's still pending, along with the Rural Economic Development Program, a shoreline restoration and washroom replacement. The status on that is also pending. The UCPR Waterfront Tourism Development Fund, we were successful in getting the St. Albert Park and dock improvements approved under that grant. And under progress is the Ontario Community Environment Fund. So the East York Creek Shoreline Stabilization, it's due June 23rd, and we're still waiting, as well as the Climate Action Awareness Fund. That the project is the SNC Forest Inventory and Carbon Models. That one is due very soon, June 3rd, quite a large grant. So keeping our fingers crossed on all of those ones that we're still hoping to hear back from. So there's a little summary here that that looks quite good. So in progress, we have 2 submissions, the 465,000. Pending are 4 submissions for 300 or a little over 300,000. We've had 7 submissions approved for 703,000, and then denied is the 1.2. But as I mentioned, we'll keep trying on those. So when other opportunities present themselves, we'll reapply. Thank you. If there's any questions.
I'll just add to Naomi's summary that on the denied, the number looks high, but one of the grants was for $900,000 under NDMP, the National Disaster Mitigation Program. Although we were not successful actually getting funding through the National Disaster Mitigation Program, we do have a very strong Eastern Ontario partnership with 5 other conservation authorities and their 50 member municipalities. So we actually will be proceeding with data acquisition in Eastern Ontario, and we'll actually be acquiring LiDAR data for the rest of our watershed and the other 4 conservation authority jurisdictions that don't have it over the next 2 years. So although that $900,000 grant wasn't approved, that project is still moving forward through a great partnership. Malcolm, I see your hand is up. Go ahead. And you're still, there we go, muted. You're muted, Malcolm. There.
It was the machine on its own. It's a marvel of technology. Sorry.
Did you have a question, Malcolm?
No,
Okay.
it was no.
All right. Does anyone else have questions?
Bill doesn't have a question, but I have a couple of comments. One is, I want to say, and the board and I particularly am very pleased with the staff work and compliments to them for the research they do, for the preparation, the foresight, the looking ahead for projects, and the applications that go in asking for extra dollars that supplement our budget really, really well and give us the opportunity to do many more activities. So I'm really pleased with the work the staff does, and I encourage them to keep it up, and thank you for doing it. And may I also say congratulations to all the staffers that were involved in planting all of the trees that got planted in the 23 days. Thank you for all of that, and it's been one of those years, but there's a lot of good things been happening. Thanks.
Thank you, Bill. Any other questions or comments? Seeing none, the recommendation is that the Fish and Wildlife Committee receive and file the grant submission update, looking for a mover and a seconder. I have Kirk and Larry. Thank you. Mr. Chair, you may call your question.
Okay, I'll call the question.
You seeing none? Bruce, your hand was up to move or second, or did you have a question? I think that was just a remnant.
Sorry, I was intending to second.
Okay, thank you, Bruce. All right, seeing no opposition, that motion is carried. And I'm just going to take us back now to item 7A, and I'll turn it over to Angela for a verbal update on the Conservation Authorities Act.
Thanks, Rhonda. I'm not sure I'm calling in on my phone. Can you hear me okay?
Yes, you're fine, Ange.
Fingers crossed. Thanks so much. Well, it's been really nice to sit and enjoy the meeting and to hear all of the staff talking so enthusiastically about those programs. I think past Chair Bill, you said it's been one of those years. I think it's been 2 of one of those years. So I want to thank everybody, including the staff and the board, for their continued excellent work over what has been a very, very busy but also a rewarding time at the Conservation Authority. So thanks again for that. This afternoon, the purpose of my presentation is really just to speak briefly about the Conservation Authorities Act paper that the Ministry of Environment, Conservation and Parks has put onto the EBR for comment. So you should know, as committee members, we've had a few updates from me and others talking about changes that the ministry wanted to make to conservation authorities. This paper is yet one more discussion paper, and it's posted and available until June 27th for comments. And following this meeting, Rhonda and I will circulate the paper for you, should you wish to provide any individual comments. There's a couple of points I would like to make on it, and doing that very briefly, recognizing that you are probably at the end of a meeting that's gone on for a bit. And some of you have heard me this morning on forestry, so I'll keep it brief. The main things to note, one is that the ministry announces that for all conservation authorities, what they're calling community advisory boards will be necessary. I think we have had the boards, we all have boards and we have committees. We have our board of directors and we have our committees. And I think that's worked well for South Nation for like 30 years now. I'm really pleased to see that conservation authorities will have this dialogue with the communities, because I think that the chat that we're having today reinforces the need for our programs and services to meet with the needs of the community and to have the opportunity. What I always think is just to leverage what we're doing and integrate that with our partners and make so much more value added for our environmental work. So I'm actually pleased to see the community advisory boards. That's one thing many people are taking issue with, but so long as we can keep our advisory boards just the way we have them, I'm encouraged, and I think this will be a good step forward for many of Ontario's conservation authorities. So that's one. The talk about core programs and services is still there, and the things that the ministry considers core are things like our floodplain mapping, hazard mapping, protection of people and property. So talking about our dams and dikes, as well as our weirs, and the conservation lands that we have as important features, together with things like source water protection. So if there's a comment I think that's important for the committee and community members to make, it's simply that it's important that conservation authorities have sustained funding in addition to all of the grants and other things that we seek out, to make sure that we can have the staffing component and the continuity in programs and services such as our environmental monitoring and stewardship work, as well as grants for activities like clean water and tree planting. So with that, again, the high points are this: we're going to send you the paper. Feel free to read that at your leisure. You have until June 27th to make comments either through myself, to me at the Conservation Authority, or to any of our board members, or separately and individually on the Environmental Bill of Rights Registry. So I encourage you to do that. Encourage you to contact myself or any of our senior management team with any questions that you have. And we're overall, while it does introduce some additional paperwork and bureaucracy, we're overall pleased with what we've seen, and we don't think it's anything that in our watershed we can't live with. So I did, Rhonda, see one question from Abraham, I think it was, but if no one else, that's the end of my really brief presentation. And again, certainly I'm here and I'm glad to answer your questions that as they come. So that's it for me.
Abraham, did you want to go ahead?
Yeah, so I didn't realize that there was an update coming to Conservation Authorities Act. And so I just get interested in how this may implicate us as Indigenous communities, or not. And I don't know if that's outside your wheelhouse to even comment on, but I'm interested in your thoughts.
Absolutely. Well, I know, Abraham, we really have appreciated the partnership that we had on the floodplain mapping project, and I hope that that's going well for both parties and you're getting what you need from us. There is some comments in there with respect to the minister and how they have done their consultation. We have been sort of third-partied on that, so we don't know exactly. The ministry on the call I was on, certainly it indicated that they've consulted with First Nations, but of course I would leave it, in your wheelhouse to sort of say, if that consultation has occurred in fact where you are, or if it's something that you have additional comments that you want to sort of discuss province to First Nation or province to feds. So we are certainly here on the ground as your local partner to help out as we can. and would encourage that dialogue to go forward. But Rhonda and I will certainly share the consultation paper and to see if you've received and etc. I'm not sure if it was sent to chiefs or if it is something that has been posted in a different way. So I can't comment on that, but certainly to say, certainly happy that we've had such a good local partnership and we hope that continues.
I guess for me, my comment would be it seems like there's a lot of reviews happening right now. Being pushed forward during this time, and it's unfortunate that this is the reality that we're facing, particularly in First Nations community when we've been inundated with the reality of COVID-19, and trying to return to some semblance of meeting our community's needs during this time. So I guess it's just a general frustration with these things because, yeah, I may have received an email, but that's not consultation to me.
Yeah. No, absolutely. And I think that those sentiments are ones that certainly we had, and it's challenging enough at the local level to keep trying to meet all of the needs, frankly, of all of the community members, and doing that at a time when we were trying to adapt to COVID and everything else. But I guess from our perspective, we see it as something that we're going to be required to do. And so if there's any additional feedback, I think that your community can provide to the province, I think that that's most welcome. And certainly we are also so sensitive to those realities that face us on the local level with respect to capacity as well. Sometimes I think maybe the policy folks have had more time than they normally have, and that's maybe why we're seeing so many of these things happening. But when we're working on the ground, it's certainly the resources are spread thin, and I think that that's a very valuable comment, and certainly one we hope that your group will bring forward.
I see Doug Thompson's hand up. Doug, go ahead. And you're on mute, Doug. Doug.
I'm off now?
You are. Go ahead.
Okay, sorry. I have to repeat myself. Can't remember what I said. Thanks, Rhonda, and Angela, thanks for a very succinct report. My question was, how is Conservation Ontario working? Are they coordinating, or are each conservation authority working on their own? I just wanted to know if there is any coordination between Conservation Authority and the conservation authorities themselves.
Yes, so that working group that the province announced, the minister announced, Conservation Ontario was part of that group. We've had a couple of calls with the general manager. I know that the Conservation Ontario meeting, though, is happening sort of mid-June. So Conservation Ontario wanted everybody's comments in by June 3rd, which I think puts us at Thursday. That was pretty short timeline. So I think that most people, while they may provide some overall comments to Conservation Ontario, they may be going it alone for some of the comments, just because there'll be, I think, a diversity of perspectives. Like I said, particularly on the calls I've been on, there's a lot of questions about advisory boards versus what a traditional board of directors is. And like I said, for us, I think we've always seen the committee model as one that's pretty valuable. So I think we differ there from what a lot of other conservation authorities may feel about this.
Okay, all right, thanks very much.
Thank you.
Do we have any other questions or comments for Angela? I see Fred. Go ahead, Fred.
Yeah, you probably know that Mississippi Valley sent around quite an alarmist assessment of these changes. And it included the idea that you couldn't use your funding from the municipalities to build parking lots in conservation areas. And I wonder what's the analysis if things go the way they're pointing. What changes would there be on what South Nation would be able to do?
I think for the most part, we really will be able to work with our municipalities for most of all the things we would want to continue to do. That, of course, will be up to the municipalities on a little bit more of perhaps what could be seen as an individualistic basis. But I think overall, like I said this morning, our board, we've been fortunate to have a board and municipalities that, while from time to time there may be some things that, you know, we're not all singing exactly from the same hymn book on, for the most part, I think we can reach agreement on these things. And I'm not really thinking that we're going to see major differences of opinion from municipality to municipality, but we have to be respectful and recognize that municipal budgets are something that we're going to have to, you know, be very sensitive towards. And we know with COVID, there could be additional budget pressures on municipalities. So I think the need is simply for more dialogue. But I don't see necessarily the need to have, you know, sweeping alarmist views of some of this stuff. It's just not how I read it. Having said that, that could be the potential outcome, but I just think in Eastern Ontario, we recognize that we're stronger together, and we know that we have challenges that are different from the GTA. So I do see us as being able to meet the challenges of this. And will there be more paperwork? Yes. Will there be more discussions? Yes. But do I think we can reach an outcome based on consensus? I do think that we can. I do think so. The only thing, Fred, like I said earlier, it's important that we see things like the tree planting program and where there's levy dollars going into tree planting. We know, for example, all municipalities have to have under the Municipal Act a bylaw that explains what they're doing for tree conservation in their watershed. Well, it may be that they say things like we're paying a levy towards, you know, tree planting that supports the watershed. It's essential, though, that we understand where dollars are going to come from, so that when program formations are happening, which is effectively now, right? We are working on our 2022 budget right now, because when we bring things, for example, the 2022 fee schedule for tree planting, etc., it's important to have that steady state funding that you rely on from year to year, even though staff are leverage the municipal contribution, and the municipal contribution may be low. It's important that I can count on that as an administrator, and that the municipalities can count on that, so we can communicate the programs and services to residents, so that we have a nice stable uptake. So I do see that, you know, if you had a different type of infrastructure, museums, parks, things that may be not self-sustaining, that might be more challenging. But we don't have the same type of infrastructure. Frankly, our parks infrastructure is pretty bare bones, and that may be way more bare bones compared to others across the province. So I'm still hopeful. Is it something we need right now in addition to COVID and the busy development reviews? Probably not. Can we live with it and work with it in a respectful way? For sure.
Okay.
Any additional comments or questions? Okay, hearing none, we'll get that piece circulated to you shortly on the link for where you can comment on the posting. Great. Thanks,
But
Angela.
as always, Rhonda, as I was saying, don't hesitate to reach out with a call or an email. I'm glad to have a conversation one-on-one on any of these with anyone. I think the more we talk about it, the more we may see challenges or differences, or the more we may find opportunities, because there's certainly a lot of opportunities in there as well with respect to, you know, watershed plans and other things that I think can make for very good watershed management for an organization. So lots of encouraging stuff in there.
Thank you. So with that, we'll move ahead into our agenda. Back to item 8, we do not have a supplemental. So item 9, I'd like to take this opportunity to congratulate our chair, Fred Schuler, on being awarded the Michael Ranklin Distinguished Canadian Herpetologist Award. So congratulations, Fred. Would you like to take a few moments to tell us about your accomplishment?
Well, it's really sort of interesting to be given an award that's named for somebody that you taught the stuff that the award is about, which I suppose is more interesting than the usual. Yeah, this was last September, and it only came out and got to be news when the Herp Society updated their website, and then flashed all over Facebook and the local newspapers and stuff. Yeah, Mike Rankin was an incredible guy who was hired as the herpetology technician at the Canadian Museum of Nature just about the time I started as a postdoc there, and we went out his first year there. We went out to the Interlake of Manitoba to look for hybrid toads, and went down to Essex County the next year. And coming back from Essex County, we always sort of came back. We promised our wives that we'd be back in a certain day, and sometimes that day would stretch on until dawn. And when we came back from Essex County, we were going up a Kyle Road, which is the road to Bishop's Mills from North Augusta, and there was this little patch of habitat, and we slammed on the brakes and jumped out because there was so little habitat in Essex County that we figured there must be something there. And this was 1981, and the first time we ever saw any reptiles or amphibians there was in 2017 when there were some leopard frogs crossing the road. So it's nice to be sort of given. And then Mike had always had heart problems, and he sort of died in his sleep in 2005, and that's when they named the award after him. But he was always helping everybody, and whenever our car broke down, he was into cars too. And whenever our vehicle broke down, he was able to lend us one of his cars. So
Thank you, Fred, and congratulations again.
The background in that photograph is Francis and Joyce Cook's place, and Joyce has passed all of Francis's decades and decades of data about the reptiles and amphibians in his area to us, and we're supposed to finish his reptiles and amphibians of Canada. And long-term data. It's so much easier to gather it than it is to analyze it.
Sounds like you have your work cut out for you, Fred. So we'll move on to our roundtable discussions. I know it's a bit challenging with community engagement during the pandemic, but if anyone has any engagement they would like to share or any upcoming events from their member organizations, please feel free to do so now.
Hi.
Go ahead, Abraham.
I would like to take a moment to acknowledge the 215 from the Kumul Residential School. I think it's important to create some space around that, as it's something that is being felt by Indigenous communities across Canada and even the United States. So that's just something I wanted to mention and create space for today, for all those communities that are feeling that loss.
Thank you, Abraham. It was very sad news for sure to hear that on the TV the other night. Do we have any others that would like to share? Bruce. Go ahead, Bruce. Oh, you're still on mute, Bruce. You were off and then you went back on mute.
Okay, we're live.
We are.
Okay, good. I just wanted to suggest that we'd like to be involved again, the Ottawa Fly Fishers, with the fish camps that are coming up, and make sure that, again, we have an opportunity to help out with the kids and put on some fly fishing demonstrations and fly tying. And so if in your planning process you were to contact us, I'm sure we could work something out.
Absolutely, Bruce. I'm sure that you are already on John and Kelsey's list, but we'll make sure that they know that you're definitely interested again.
Okay, thank you. There is
You're welcome.
one other thing I'd like to mention. You were when we summed up, or you summed up Angela's approach, I thought it was really pleasant to hear somebody with a positive approach on some of these changes coming down. And it really is refreshing to have an optimist.
Thank you, Bruce. I see both Fred and Alita have their hands up, so I'll let either one of you go ahead.
Okay, I'll say something.
Alita, why don't you go ahead?
In terms of pardon me, which one?
Go ahead, Alita.
Okay. All right. Yes. The question was what kind of interface have we had with our community in our areas about conservation and stuff. Fred has been very, very busy. It seems like almost half the time educating on Facebook. There's been he's been and also putting almost weekly articles in the North Grenville Times about different species that are actually, things that he's been observing at the time, and the Times has been very responsive about publishing like the same week as, like they really appreciate his input. They appreciate the timeliness of his information, and it's just been so gratifying to have that kind of assistance with community outreach, especially when we're not, giving talks in person or field trips in person or anything like that, and attending meetings. I mean, he continues with his membership on the Environment Council at the municipality, but lately there's been a lot of excitement on Facebook about giant European hornets and people sending in photographs, and then our Fred's comments and an article on garlic mustard and as an invasive, and people are asking questions, and they're making giving him input, and of course being shared on Facebook. Everyone else gets educated too on what kind of invasiveness they have in their place, and it seems to be spreading quite a lot this year. And another thing that's been spreading a lot that we've just been discovering is what's called bedstraw or cleavers. And I realize it's called cleavers because it cleaves to you, because there's a kind that has little sort of sticky hairs that clings to your clothes. Anyway, that's been like, it's just been bursting up like a sea in our kind of little black, like our Manitoba maple grove here. A lot of other people have commented that they have it as well. And also just lately, this morning, Fred was asking around about what kind of frost effects people have. So there's been a lot of comment on the nature list on that, and people are saying what they've had frosted and where, and that's always important to document phenology or the seasonality of things, and especially in times of climate change. So anyway, that's what's sort of been happening around our area here.
Yes, if there's one thing the pandemic brought us with the virtual world, it certainly is not a lack of work these days. Fred, would you like to go ahead?
Yeah, I was just going to say that we have this new environmental advisory committee in North Grenville, and Amy Ivany is the chair of it, and so far we've been engaged in the question of waste disposal and garbage pickup and organic waste and that kind of thing. But just last night, we had a meeting where it just exploded and talk about biodiversity of forests and clearing of forests and roadkill and water quality and a whole bunch of stuff, which parallels a lot of things that we've talked about in this committee. So I'll be sending stuff around about that, and I'll send a list to all the links about the plant articles that I've had in the North Grenville Times, because we're sort of accumulating a brochure or the prospects of a book about conspicuous plant species, mostly invasive species that are changing in their status. So.
Great, thanks, Fred. Are there any other community engagement updates? Seeing none. Fred, did you want to touch on the watershed monitoring report? I know you sent an email earlier this afternoon to the committee.
No, just fill out your forms, send them in, and be sure that you delete the 2.6 megabyte picture that I've got of the mystery snails in there when you return the document.
All right, so that moves us on to the date of our next meeting. So we are scheduled to meet September 7th at 3 p.m. At this point, we will plan for a virtual meeting until we see sort of how public safety measures unfold as we move through the pandemic. At this point, we did have a brief conversation with our Forestry Committee member, and I'd be looking for some feedback from this group as well. As you know, we've been meeting virtually over the last year with the pandemic, and we're interested to hear your feedback on virtual versus in-person meetings. What have you liked? What don't you like? As we look to the future, we're curious to know if the committees would be interested in still having perhaps a combination of virtual and or in-person meetings. So I would just open it up to anyone who wants to give some feedback maybe on the last year that we've sort of been virtual with our committee meetings. Go ahead, Alvin.
Well, I kind of miss meeting the people around the table. And I always like to see Fred and Alita and Michelle and you name it. There's something about being in the same room with everybody like that. And that's the part I miss. And I guess it's the same with, you know, I don't see many of my friends, and it's just missing the people, the big world of people. And today I just went to Freshco in the city for the third time in 2 years. I used to go there every week. Anyway, that's all I have to say. Thanks.
Thanks, Alvin. Anyone else have any comments they want to share at this time? If not, you can always send me a comment by email or give me a call. That would be fine as well. Abraham, go ahead.
I think that I would like a combination of the two as well. I do like meeting in person, but I recognize that I've been able to participate in more committees and meetings because of them being made available through video conferencing. So for me, it really allows me more time in my life, because otherwise I would be driving back an hour from SNC after the meeting and not get home until about 6. So I really do kind of appreciate the opportunities this provides.
Thank you, Abraham. Fred?
Yeah, I think it probably largely depends on the quality of your internet, how much of a strain it is to hear what people are saying. That's one thought. And it also, driving to Finch gets everybody across that, however much of the territory that they cross, so they can see what's going on.
Good point, Fred. Thank you for sharing that. Anyone else? Great. I kind of threw that one at you last minute. So again, if you have any thoughts afterwards that you'd like to share, feel free to reach out. As I said, we will at this point plan for a virtual meeting for September. And if that changes as we move through the next stages of the pandemic, we'll let you know. So 3 p.m. on the 7th. And if there's no other business to discuss, I will look for a motion to adjourn. Thank you, Alvin. We'll adjourn at 4:56. Great. Thank you, Mr. Chair. You may close us out if you wish.
Right. So, not hearing any opposition to that adjournment, I'll say that we're adjourned.
Thank you, and everyone, please stay safe and enjoy yourselves. Yes, Alita?
Thanks.
Well, it seemed like Alvin and Malcolm both had their hands up just at the very end. Then I don't know if you noticed. I don't know if they still want to speak.
Alvin's went up. I assumed he was moving. Did you have anything to add, Alvin or Bruce?
But Malcolm's fast. I'll let him do it. He's quick on the trigger and he's quick at raising his hand.
There we go. All right, everyone, if there's nothing else, I'll wish everyone a good evening. Stay safe until we see you in September.
Bye. Have a nice summer, guys and gals.
Care.
Oh no.